There we go. Well, hello. Welcome to Talk Art. This is a SOLA production, and SOLA is the Society of Local Artists of the San Francisco Bay Area. And today we're going to talk to two artists, Nancy Whitcraft and Jill Andre, and we're going to find out how art has changed their lives and how their lives have been changed by their art. So first we're going to speak with Nancy. Nancy, so now I believe that you first started out as, what was your degree
as an
in?
illustrator, actually. No, as an interior designer. When I first went to college, I was in interior design, and then I realized you have to know a lot of math and draw straight lines, so I quickly got out of that, and I transferred to Rutgers University in New Jersey, and I majored in art, and have a background in illustration.
You're looking at my notes?
No,
you can look at
no,
my notes.
no.
You know all this stuff. Like you have this stuff memorized because you grew up doing this stuff.
That's
you don't
right,
have to
I
read
did it.
my notes on this. I have to read my notes because I didn't grow up with you. But now you grew up, you also, speaking of growing up, you grew up in Jersey.
I did. I grew up in South Jersey near Philadelphia, and then I went to Rutgers, which is actually near New York, Manhattan. And then soon after I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles. And when I was in LA, I worked for a art school, and then later I worked for a digital effects company.
Digital effects time. Which company was that?
I don't think it's around anymore. At the time, it was called RGALA, and they used to do movie titles for major movies. They did the titles for movies like Seven and Twister and kind of.
Oh, and it was a really crazy place, right? And you were in your 20s, and it was really crazy,
it was a little manic,
kind of group of people.
Yeah, a little wacky. The artists were great, but my boss was a little insane, so I left there. I hope he's not watching. Is that kind of like being a little pregnant? Either you're insane or you're not. And then you said that this boss liked to, he made their day in order to make people cry, which is really good in the art community because people are just, Because it really sparks creativity when you put a lot of pressure and you make people nervous. Well, movies like Seven, Okay. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, sure. That really helped me. I just, it just makes me blossom. So I, smartened up and I got out of that. Good. And I moved back to the Philadelphia area, and I ended up actually working for Tiffany & Company. And that's how you got out here? So we got you back out in California because Tiffany brought you out here. That's right. I transferred out here and used to work in Palo Alto, which was fabulous, and I worked there for about 3 years. I was with Tiffany for about 6 years. I want to back up a little bit before you do that. Sure. So let's go back to your illustrating era. So when you were I think you've mentioned to me, and I've seen your art, and you've got this art behind us as well, which we'll look at later. But you like fine art, but you also liked illustrating, and which was what probably drew you into the interior design, which then you kept moving over. You kept moving away from more rigorous into more art, but then you kind of went back again to your illustration style. Right. So you do fine art with an illustration bend. So now you've started to do some of your fine art. You've turned into ability. I've turned in. Well, I've started to turn into T-shirts. Okay. And we have some prints on JPEGs that we're going to show on the TV in a moment that you have actually, we're going to show you the fine art that you've done, but you're going to tell us how you actually were able to make these into T-shirt prints as well. So at some point we're going to have some prints come up here and we'll talk about them. And one of them, see, we've got 4 of them, and the 4 that you brought, I don't have the names of them, but you know I was doing a series of aquatic images, and so I was doing kind of fish paintings. I'm really into color, and I love, color and shape, and I have kind of a graphic sense coming from illustration. Okay. So the paintings that I bought tonight, the one that's behind us, is called Orange, Black, and White, and it's canvas with acrylic and sand. Okay. And so I've kind of built it out. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Okay. There's actual sand in there. Wow. Good. Very good. So what I want also to do is now this is a very full, rich painting. Now, did you say you took some of these and were able to get them on your T-shirts? I was, but I have 2 different things kind of going. What I did was, in order to kind of market myself, because marketing is a very important part of art, so one of the things I do to market myself is I take the fish paintings and then I turn them into even more graphic images and I put them on T-shirts. Okay. And then underneath I put my name and aquatic images. Okay, so there's 2 things I'm going to ask the studio to do for us, and that is to make sure the website goes up. And which website is the aquatic art? So the aquatic art actually is on NCW
I just forgot my name. I'm on television. I got loopy.
You got Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy.
That's the N part.
That's
and the W
right.
is for Whitcraft.
Okay, but
and
it's NC because it's my middle name, so it's ncwhitcraft.com.
Okay.
And that's kind of my more fine art stuff and a lot of my paintings.
Okay.
And then
And we see. I see they've got some of your web address is up right now, but we also want to have some of the JPEGs to come up because there's 4 JPEGs. And what are those 4 JPEGs?
So the 4 JPEGs, 2 are of my aquatic images of my fish paintings, and then 2 are of these graphic T-shirts that I'm doing.
All right. And what are the names of these pieces of art?
The one is called Koi and Grass, and the other one is Jamaican Water, because I was snorkeling and I took some photos of fish in Jamaica.
Nice.
So yeah,
nice.
You know what I'm saying.
I have not snorkeled in Jamaica, but I love snorkeling. When I first started snorkeling, I was afraid to breathe underwater. It was really freaking me out.
Yeah.
And then the fish came by, and it was so amazing that I started to follow the fish. My head went underwater, and the water went in the snorkel. I really didn't get very good at it, but I don't get a chance to snorkel around here very much. It's not very fun to snorkel in the bay.
No. But I love the fish, though, for the color. You know, the colors are amazing,
Oh, yeah.
and the luminescence of fish, and so.
Wait, you told me earlier that you also were inspired by some other artists, that we have some local artists.
Yeah, well, 2 of the people that I really like, from my illustration background, I really love Chris Van Allsburg. He was the author, the children's author who wrote Jumanji.
One of my favorite movies. I love that movie. So he wrote this, and he's also an artist.
Yeah, he's an amazing artist.
We've got I think we've got 2 JPEGs that you brought. One of them is by him, and that one is of the Blender?
No, that's by another artist.
Okay.
And he's actually a realism painter, and his name is John Mora, and he does very realistic things, which is kind of my influence and what I really enjoy.
So John Mora. Now, John Mora is... he's the East Coast guy?
No, he's on the West Coast.
He's the West Coast guy, okay.
Yeah, and he's a realism painter. He does mainly still lives, but his still lives are of things of like mixers and mixing bowls.
Yeah, now Jill, you talked about this. You know this artist as well. So
I've seen his work, yes.
You've seen his work, and do you want to talk about this a little bit with us?
Yeah, I'd love to join in. Thank you.
Kind of just slide on up here.
This is Jill.
Yeah. Jill Andre, another artist here tonight. So Jill Andre, both of you live around here, and we're talking about John. Well, both of us are talking about or all 3 of us are talking about John Mora. We've got him up online on the screen right now. So this guy, his work is shown where?
He's in the John Pence Gallery in San Francisco, and he also teaches at a college called the Gage Academy.
Okay, where's that?
That is in Seattle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Jill, have you ever seen him in the museums, or?
I've seen his work before. I didn't know Nancy knew of his work. My husband and I have collected old mixers and blenders, and when I saw his work and the detail that went into it and the color and the light, I thought,
that's why
why
you're attracted to it.
Yes,
because your husband's also in art.
Yes, and so
ways.
these items, these ordinary things, are very sculptural.
Yeah.
And to have somebody else see the surface quality of it and pick out the lights and the darks.
And the beauty of a blender, I mean, or beauty of a mixer, it's kind of bizarre. You know, if you see a mixer in a catalog or something, you're like, oh, this would make a nice cake. But, you know, you see somebody who just turns it into this, you know, just luscious piece of art, and it's just amazing. It makes you realize that there's art and beauty in everything, you know, including everyday objects, including, you know, cups.
Or, you know, I bought these cups specifically for the show because I thought they were beautiful, and I didn't want to have just some plain old coffee cup that people have on their desks at, you know, in their cubicle, or they shuffle into the kitchen and go grab some old mug. We have some artistic cup for here, and whatever we put in it doesn't matter. So now I just wanted to talk a little bit more about the contemporary artists that may have influenced either one of you. So we talked about these 2 people, and they're both current artists, and one's more East Coast and one's more West Coast, and you are East West Coast, and you have always lived here, Jill.
West Coast.
You're West Coast only. Okay, so now you grew up on the other side of the bay.
East Bay area.
East Bay. Okay, so we let you come over here.
Well, no. First, I had to go down to Los Angeles.
Oh, you also
and then came up.
Now, you also come from an illustrator background, and you also had the same sort of degree aspirations as the interior design major?
Yes, I think a lot of young people are told to make something useful out of their artistic talents, and so I attempted to be useful in that way and got a degree in interior architectural design.
Okay.
And
yep.
I tried it, and after all that work in school, it wasn't for me. It's really the drawing and the painting that I absolutely love.
And you came up here and you got involved in Pixels.
From pen to pixel,
Okay.
yes. I worked for a children's software company. We did educational software. And I did a series of little icons, about 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch.
That's an icon.
That's
yep.
an icon,
yeah,
yes.
that's
And
an
I
icon.
ended up doing about 800 of those, representing various words, a lot of verbs.
So you did those by hand? You didn't render them with some fancy software like the software companies around here? Okay.
No, the art director really liked the quality of my
Handmade.
hand drawing. And so, but of course I would scan them in and then color them. And I would scan them in and have these big, giant pixels that I was looking at for these little teeny tiny drawings, and I would just...
So you just dreamed them, you saw them for everything?
I saw them, and then I had told you, when I would look at these pixels and I would see all the lights and darks, and that's the way I started seeing things, and then I would pick up a piece of paper to read something, and all I could see were the shapes of the letters.
Yeah.
I couldn't see the words anymore.
Yeah.
That I had just gotten so into visual, and I am such a visual person that for me not to draw and paint is like not being able to speak your native language.
Well, I'd agree, and I think the same thing happens to musicians and people that program or anything that if you do it so much that becomes your primary way of interacting with your own consciousness, that becomes your method of communication, so that makes total sense. I've had similar things happen for other reasons. So I think what I wanted to talk to you about was, let me see here, what's next for Jill Andre of Menlo Park? Now, you're not at any gallery now because the famous gallery that you were
Art
in
21 was a fabulous experience.
We lower our eyes for a moment, is now gone.
Yes. But it was 5 good years.
5 very good years, yes. You were there from the beginning to the end. And you are not showing in a gallery right now, so you're up on the block, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah, you are. So any gallery people out there, this is a fantastic artist, and she has people that are trying to collect your artwork, but they don't know where to go. But you do have a fantastic studio you have since built.
Yes.
And it is a wonderful, it's one of the best studios I've seen around here, and it's private. So
it's wonderful. It's
nice. You need to like maybe open it up and have hours or something. I don't know what to do. But I would like to talk to you, or like have you talk to us about the JPEGs you brought and maybe the artwork that you brought with you as well. So you've got a piece behind you, and it is called...
This one's untitled still.
Untitled still. That's an interesting title.
There we go, yes.
You know, I've met other artists that used to come to the gallery with that kind of thing, and I'd say, no, you've got to get a title to it. But I guess since you're not in the gallery now, you can get away with that for...
Usually I title things when I'm about ready to put it out into the public and do a show, and so I'll have a series of pieces, and the titles will relate one to the other. And I have a good advisor who helps me with naming things so they're not too ridiculous.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me your son.
No.
Okay, so now this piece here, now how does this relate to the 4 JPEGs you brought in?
The 4 JPEGs that I brought in...
well, let's talk about this first, though. We're
actually,
zooming in on this, I think.
The JPEGs precede what you see here in the studio. So the JPEGs are...
Well, we're going to go backwards, I think. We're going to talk about this artwork first, though. So this artwork, this one is... Because we got the camera on it, so you don't want to mess... You can't just complicated stuff here, Jill. Okay. So
this painting comes out of some collage work that I've been doing when I'm in this group called the Drawing Circus, and there's models who move and perform and lighting, and I've been doing a series of collages where I just have magazines and glue sticks and pieces of paper, and sometimes I'll just tear out this little piece of paper and based on what I see on the model.
What do we have here? So this kind of looks like the little pieces of paper that you... Here, let's not put it up in front of Nancy's head.
No, I'll be happy.
Here.
There we go.
I don't know how easy it's going to be. There we go. We've got a nice big shot here. I don't know who's on it, but anyway. It's beautiful. Those are really nice. They're very interesting, and you're one of the few artists that can take this kind of thing and turn it into really nice pieces. So, they'll come to you. Don't worry about it.
No, it's blocking my face.
I'm trying to help her. But you're so beautiful. You don't have to block your face. Okay, so I'd like to, if we can, I don't know if the director's probably going to cream me after the show is over. Could you please bring up some JPEGs, because Jill wants to talk about her ripped up pieces of paper. So she rips paper up like this, right? This is what you do?
But it's very specific. I'm not being random. As I'm looking at the model, I am following the shape of her figure.
So you're drawing an artist by ripping paper.
Drawing a figure, yes. So the edge
very
is
unusual.
Is that? And
so here you go. Here's one up here. Take a look at this.
Okay, so
Life.
Bend It Like
Beckman.
Hans Beckman. I happen to have a very glossy, shiny artist magazine, and Max Beckman is an artist that I've identified with for a long time, funny. My husband and such. And so I just have these pieces of paper from the art magazines, and I'm tearing, and I'm making these shapes, and then I'll place one on top of the other, maybe draw on it, and I'll have all these shapes happening at the same time, and I'll move them around, and then I'll find a spot where they belong, and then I glue it down.
Okay.
And that is how a piece, like the piece that we have here in the studio, how something like that comes about, where I'm using the model and the light as a reference, but I'm also using the collage pieces as a reference, and I'm making the shapes, and then
you kind of meld the two together.
I'm looking for how they go together, and then
it's a very unusual technique. I was a little concerned about you using magazine paper for your fine art, because you're a very good fine artist and you've got a very strong following, and all your art, you sell out your shows all the time. So I was concerned about where this is going, but it's a really neat idea to. I mean, she's creating figures with these magazine ripped pieces, and you've been doing this for quite a while now.
I have.
So can we have some more of those up? I don't know. We saw the one, the bend. Here we go. Ooh, look at this.
We have this
hand carved. Wow.
This you can see the feminine figure and the form of maybe the shape of a back and a cloth around her. But often what will happen is I start ripping and I make this silhouette, and then I'll turn it over and say, the way that these shapes landed against the thing that was on the back is way more interesting than what I intended on the front. And so I'll often turn things over and just looking for something that's going to happen that I wasn't expecting. So, and it's interesting using these fine art magazines that have Rembrandt's and Christie's auction magazine and these very well-known images.
You're just kind of ripping into them, aren't you?
I kind of am.
This is a statement then. The back statement is you're ripping into those people. Okay, well, I hope you come to New York and you can rip into them in person if you want. So, we've got one more up. Okay, good.
Birdland. I just am fascinated by bird shapes, and so I'm making these shapes of the model, and I'll do multiples of the same model, and then just like how do they relate? And this one needed some kind of surface to be on, so there's that black and white striped piece of paper, which another artist happened to have that just went there.
Oh, I loved it. I love it. Yeah. And there's one more, I think, before we move on to.
This is the auction block. This is Christie's auction magazine.
Very good.
And I did that, tearing out the figure, and I love the way that the face of the old master is right there in the center, and yet there's still a figure. Yes. I believe it's a Rembrandt, but I could be wrong. And then Christie's, of course, it's all about auction. It's all about selling it, and so there's this dark figure being auctioned, and
great.
But it's not like highly intellectual, like I'm going to just stick it to Christie's. It's just these things appear, and then they suggest their own story.
Oh, because you love Christie's, don't you? I mean, Christie's is a big part of the art world.
It is. It is.
No,
I'm just playing.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all
good.
play.
Yeah. So you can't rip on a corporation like that.
Oh yeah.
They do weird things, but they do great things too.
Oh, yeah.
So, what I think I'd like to move into now is to talk about this, what we've kind of been on the edge of a lot at the beginning of the talk with you, with the crazy makers and the shadow self and the light self. So what I've named this talk is the dark and the shadow and the light of art life, and something similar to that. But there's the shadow side, and we express it in our artwork, and then there's the light side that we
maybe we compliment on the artwork as well. And then there's the crazy makers that make us flip from one end to the other because of this. So when you're tearing up artwork like this from art magazines, that you get these art magazines for what's the reason we originally get them for? Not to rip them up, but to...
No, actually, Edward threw it at me, so that was the impetus.
He said,
here, take this.
Oh, Edward is the man who organizes
the director of the Drawing Circus.
The Drawing Circus, which has been going on for a long, long time. It's an incredible. You should come to it. It's amazing. Anyway, so you were forced. These things were forced upon you. So you said, "Fine, I'm gonna rip them up."
He just tries to make you get out of your comfort zone, and so
okay.
He threw this at me.
All right. So.
And you said, "I'll show you."
No.
So when you have ups and downs, so let's just say when you were earlier in your art career, early in your life, both of you, in fact myself as well, we've had times where things are a little more unsteady because you're not sure how life is. I mean, compared to now, right? Everything seems to be a lot more stable because you know a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of ground yourself more easily. But when we're younger, especially when you've got this ability and vision of seeing the world so visually and differently than most other people.
Well, one of the things that we had talked about previously in another conversation, but I thought was interesting, was when I first started really getting into art and really doing illustration, my professor at the time had said to me, you know, Nancy, your work is a contradictory because when you come to class, you're always, you know, you're very smiley and you're very, you know, warm. He said, but your work is kind of very edgy and a little dark. And then I feel like as I got older, I became more of who I was, so I didn't always feel like I had to be the happy, smiley person all the time. And subsequently, my work has actually gotten much more happy, if you will. So I think it's interesting how it can flip-flop like that, you know, where my persona was happy, but my work was dark, and now that I'm kind of more happy and more fulfilled, my work is also more happy looking, or you know, the colors and everything are to make people kind of feel good. And I also feel, you know, now if people don't like me or whatever, you know, I don't really care. So I think it's just something that you gain with, you know, age and experience.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the same thing, Jill. When you were younger, you had a darker period, and what happened to your art during the periods when you were a little darker?
Oh goodness, some of my work is very dark.
So it matched your personality, unlike
it actually
what
did.
Okay.
It did.
Did it shut you down at all? Were you able to keep painting, or did it shut you down?
I wouldn't show it to people because it was so dark and personal. And then as I got more happy with my life and was more in the world, and my work did lighten up, and there's always the shadow, the dark side. And at one point in my life, I felt like the dark shadow was leaving me. And I wouldn't let it go. And I said, no, you don't. You're staying here because in order to show anything that is light, you must have shadow. You must have darkness.
Well, you know, it's interesting because in art itself, that's what it's all about. Yes. I remember realizing when I was really quite young that the way you create three-dimensionality is with the shadows. You know, here you are in grade school, and everyone draws the nose just like a U, a big U, right? And I had figured out in grade school that it's all about shadow, and so I started staring at people a lot, trying to figure out. You know, here's this little kid with this intense stare, trying to figure stuff out and trying to figure out what makes that person look the way they do, and try to figure out the shape of the shadow. So you can draw the shape of that shadow. See, I didn't have any formal education at that age, of course. So I got in trouble all the time, and it's that shadow that we have to recognize, the shadow, the real shadow, the actual physical sun shadow of humanity and of being, in order to be able to create the art to make it interesting. Shadow and color does everything, but I think it's not by accident that it's something, the shadow side of personalities is what we have to engage in order to be able to reach in and produce that. I don't think it's just words. I think it's very meaningful to be able to have all that connect together.
And it is a balance of the light and shadow self. So you, when you were younger, you only projected your light self, and therefore you needed the shadow in the art.
That's right. Yeah.
Whereas you...
Now we can be our shadow selves in public.
Exactly. I love that.
We could be older, cranky. You know, we're not older women, but we aren't young and silly anymore. Or
Old and silly.
Yeah. There's interesting things that can happen as you gain.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to talk about Jill's work for a minute.
Sure.
I was looking at these scraps and...
They're not scraps.
Well, on scrap pieces of paper. They're not... But anyway, Jill was doing an interesting thing. You want to say what you were doing?
It
was just
You have to hold things up because somebody else is going to be able to see
Somebody
it.
else is going to see. Something similar to what I do in my drawing group or when I'm just looking at things is I'll line something up and find this relationship that makes this connection, this shape between the colors and the line. And that's very just looking with my eyes and moving with my hands and not thinking, oh, I'm going to make it look like this. It's just finding relationships, and so you can move that out, and it's like, that doesn't look, and move that together, like, oh, yeah, that feels good.
Yeah.
And that is
Again,
part of what I do.
It's almost like what happens in actual lives, because you're doing something that you think needs to be done because it reminds you of something, or somebody's given you a goal, and then pretty soon it's not really working because you don't really have, it's not real for you, so you try to fit it into something else that fits right for you. You try to match it up with something else because you're not sure. So you're looking for that hand in glove experience, which is what...
But one of the things I thought was so interesting is that these are all created separately, right? But then when you can put them together, they're all separate pieces that don't really seem to interrelate. But then when you lay them together, they all form kind of into a cool puzzle where you can really line up the thing. So it may look sporadic, but it's all parts of one whole feeling.
There we go. There it is.
You're welcome. But I was really amazed by that when I was looking at it during the conversation.
I mean, I'm always looking for figures, right? People do, they look for figures. It's very nice. I like it quite a bit. So we're getting close to the end here. I'm going to put this down now. Thank you for bringing some art that we could play with, and you can actually smell the oil crayons on that. So thank you very much for coming tonight, both of you, Jill Andre and Nancy Whitcraft. I wanted to ask you about your last name. Is your husband's last name?
No.
It's your last name?
It's my last name.
It's a really cool last name, I have to tell you. I love that name.
No, my husband's last name is Cooley, which is a fine name.
It's also a really cool name.
Cool. Yeah, cool. But I kept my last name, which is Whitcraft, and it's English, and it's derivative from wheat farmers.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Well, thank you very much for coming to SOLA and SOLA's Talk Art. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you.